Welcome to the Healers Café, the number one show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. So, welcome to the Healers Cafe. And today I have with me Edie Nathan. And she's a licensed psychotherapist, certified sex therapist, and grief expert who guides people through the terrain most people avoid, which is grief, trauma, and sexuality. With master's degree from NYU and Fordham and certifications in sex therapy from the University of Michigan, Edie brings clinical depth and grounded compassion to the conversations we're often too afraid to have. So, welcome, and let's not be afraid over here. This is the whole point of this podcast is really to discuss what most people, or illuminate that one can discuss these subjects uh, because why should they be silent anymore? And why should people not realize that what they're experiencing might just be what people experience, So, um, yeah, welcome. And I think, yeah, the first question I would ask you though is, how did you get focused in this? And I'm understanding from you a little bit that grief is one thing, and then you have also this component, the sexuality grief chapter. They're sort of the same but separate. So yeah, let's go from there.
Okay, so to define, I've got the grief piece, and then I've got sexual grief. And sexual grief it does have to do with sexuality, just like grief. Often when people think of grief, straightforward grief, it's because we've lost a loved one.
Mhm.
What I've done is expanded the idea on both accounts.
Right.
And sexual grief is actually this what I call the sexual grief effect is mine, and I will explain to your audience what I mean by that. Grief, I don't know that I need to explain it except to say that sometimes the thought is, oh, we only think about grief or are affected by grief when we've lost a loved one, when we've lost a friend, a companion, a partner, a child, an animal. But grief is so much more than that. And I think it came to light actually during those years where we were, um, inside and protecting ourselves and scared. And that people realized maybe I can't be with myself. And there
Mm,
was grief in the understanding and the knowledge of I am afraid without my busyness, and I
mm,
don't know how to manage my life. And in that, they met the complexities of grief. Now,
mm,
anxiety can look like grief, and or grief can look like anxiety, and grief can look like depression or malaise, and grief can unfold in myriad ways and is layered, and it doesn't follow a path. And
mhm,
you asked a question, how did I get into this? Well,
mhm,
you know, it's there are so many stories in my life that have led me here.
mhm, mhm,
I can share with you and with your audience that when I was 27, I lost my partner, and that really leveled me emotionally. And I had nowhere to go. I had no one to talk to, and the insides of my emotional world
mhm,
were in they I was in shreds. And the embodiment of that shreddedness kind of left me not able to know how to function in the world. And because this partner taught me about love and taught me what it was to actually know how to be nurtured and to be able to accept it and to feel and understand that I was worthy of that, because up until that time I didn't have that companion with me, that sense of
mhm,
I could hold on to love.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a huge it's a huge part, right? And when you figure that you actually are worthy, right? And then to lose that person who's the messenger, that
Who's
must
the
be,
messenger? That's
yeah.
right. He was
Mm,
the messenger, he was the holder, he was the container, and when I was with him, everything was okay.
yeah.
And so that kind of gets me into the whole sexual grief piece, except that I must share that the sexual grief effect did not come to me until much, much later in my work and in my process. And it happened, right before we shut down and we had to face parts of the self that we didn't really want to face or didn't even know how to face. And I am a survivor of a predatory event that happened when I was 9, and though though in other aspects of my life I may not have experienced a sexually traumatic predatory event, I certainly met events and experiences that were more developmental that created a sexual grief within me that I did not have a label for or didn't know how to accurately name. And
Mhm,
it's through my work in trauma, in grief, and in the collaborative sex, and sex not as sex of the kind of sex that we might have with a partner or that we might have perhaps even with ourselves. It was the idea, going back to kind of this old sage person named Freud, who talked about um, the sexual driver, and that sexual driver could lives within us, and when it is flattened, it affects our ability to feel that we can participate in life and that we have hunger and desire to go to work, to dream, to get engaged in our lives in such a way that we feel alive, and that driver, when it deadens in our brains, in our prefrontal cortexes, that when it deadens, that we're flat, and when we are flat, we don't know how to hold on to love. So I'm going full circle now because it was my inability to hold on to love back when I was 27, 26, 25. And I had that partner who taught me about it. Didn't mean I knew how to hold it. And when there is an absence of the memory of love, that we can feel it when it's there, but when it's gone, we don't remember it. I believe that that's what happens with the sexual grief effect, which is the natural response to a sexually traumatic predatory event or
mhm,
developmental experience, like not being wanted, or as a child, or the first sexual experience goes wrong and it alters us, or there's teasing as a child,
mhm,
or there's the aging process, or there's medication that changes our desires and our urges and changes how we think about ourselves.
mhm,
And
mhm,
what results from that is a kind of imprisonment. And that
mhm.
imprisonment affects that driver, right? And
Right.
when that driver is affected and we feel imprisoned, our functioning deteriorates. And
Mhm,
so when you're imprisoned, you need to find a way to get liberated. And what I've created and borrowed, very frankly, from Chris Voss's amazing hostage negotiation strategies, but I've taken those hostage strategies and I've allowed the teaching of those strategies into the liberation protocol so that we, any of us as survivors or
mhm,
survivalists, as I like to call
mhm.
myself and
Better
others,
word, yeah.
yeah, that we learn how to be negotiate with that which keeps us stuck.
Wow, beautifully explained. I'm just going to reiterate a couple points to make sure
Please.
I've
I know
understood
I just gave a
it.
mouthful here,
No,
so
no, it's great. It's poetic and beautiful, and I sense what you're saying.
thank you.
But just to be clear for me, it's it, another way of looking at it could be simply that there's like a deadness from a traumatic experience, any of the ones you mentioned, to do with some form of sexual, whether it's rejection or
A
any of the
predatory event,
predatory event,
abuse.
basically. So that when you find somebody who is giving you love and that you realize that you haven't really learned how to receive. It's like you are absent in that process. And so what I'm understanding is that it wasn't right at the same time as you had the loss. It was later you reflected that it's connected because you couldn't develop that part. So you could only receive it if he gave it. But once the giver was gone, it's like all the work
It's
had to be
forgotten.
yours. It's forgotten. There was nothing else. So that, in a sense, everyone has to work on themselves.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's it's about attachment, I am not an attachment therapist. And we need healthy attachments. We need healthy relationships, not relationships where if we're fused and we're like walking around where we're just attached at the hip, we can't really see ourselves and we really can't see the person that we're with.
Yeah.
We need more of what I call this figure eight, and it's the in between. It's what goes on in the in between the two circles, so that we are individuals, and then we have a place where we are joined and a place where we are separate. And it
Mhm.
is in that separateness that when you have experienced a predatory event that was, an experience, an event that happened to you, or a developmental experience, that kind of sexual grief, and it's a grief, it's a deep grief, because
Mhm.
some part of you got lost,
Yeah.
has died.
Yeah.
And the hope in the work is to bring your the different aspects of the self and the soul back online.
Mm. So let's talk about this hostage theory because
Sure.
I know I'm sure you've written about it and it'll be hard to summarize in a short time, but if you could give the main lines of that
So I
thinking.
call
What
it,
would your life be like if you were pain free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
the liberation protocol, and I really, for your listening audience, hostages are a really tough word these days, and we're living in a critical time right now. And so I had to actually, just to be very unveil my process, I needed to rethink, how am I going to present this, because that word is a tough word for so many, and it's a sad. We've got people who are in encased in a situation where they cannot really extricate themselves. and they are being hurt. So I am really wanting to say, okay, so you're imprisoned by something that hurt you. I'm hoping that you're not continuing to be hurt, although in domestic violence situations, sometimes it does continue, but there is this sense of, I can't get out. I'm stuck. I'm
Mhm.
stuck. And we don't even know that we're stuck, or we don't even know that we're not remembering the love of another once they're gone. Either they're gone or they've left for work for the day, and we
Mhm.
don't hold it. And we could, uh, that's where myself and Freud break, because I'm not saying, oh, well, that attachment didn't happen, in those tender moments with the primary mother or parent,
Mhm.
but that it happened after the loss of the
Yeah.
self, after an abusive situation, that predatory event, or that
Mhm.
developmental, experience.
Mhm.
And that the liberation protocol, I look at an embodied curiosity. How do you become curious with the self? And that curiosity, this becomes very kind of involved, if you will. But if you think that we all have kind of five quadrants that we live in. We have an emotional life, we have a physical life, we have a social and community life. We have a physical life, and we have the life of the psyche.
Mhm.
And we have all of those aspects of the self. Some of them are more developed than others. When we are looking at this liberation protocol, we're looking at within each strategy of the liberation protocol, being curious about the self means that embodied curiosity goes to, where am I spiritually, psycho-spiritually? Where am I physically? Where am I emotionally? What is going on with me in my psyche? And
Mhm.
you're asking the question within all of these five quadrants, within each of those strategies. So the first strategy of embodied curiosity will look at those five quadrants.
Mhm.
And it is the curiosity is, if you think about being stuck and being imprisoned, you're talking to the part of you that is imprisoned, which is kind of the taker. It's the prison guard. And you're talking to the prison guard and you're saying, okay, I'm going to be curious. Why are you holding me prisoner? Why have you taken me? Why have you taken some part of my spiritual beliefs? I need to understand what's going on here and how it serves you to have taken this from me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's then the body. Maybe there's been weight gain or weight loss. Maybe there's lack of sleep. Maybe there's been over sexualized behavior, out of control sexual behavior. Maybe, and the list could go on.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you're looking at each of these liberation protocols from the lens of these five different quadrants.
Mhm. So, talking to the prison guard,
Mm-hmm.
like as far as self, it's I mean, it's an act of taking full responsibility doing this. I see that. But
Yes.
it's like the victim, you, to a type of perpetrator of your prison when
That's
you're
right.
talking to the guard, right? And so
And
you
the guard is that, in a way, it's the perpetrator, but it's the perpetrator that results. It's like the hostage taker.
right,
Okay. That's
exactly.
really,
Yeah,
it's really what's going on here. And this hostage taker is holding you imprisoned, and it's because of the experiences or events that you've had.
right, right.
And
And
you
then,
need
yeah,
to get out. You need to free yourself. Does it mean forgetting? No,
yeah,
never. It means, how am I going to learn to remember this more peacefully? And
right,
that's what this
right.
is about.
Yeah. And stop the endless suffering about it, which
That's
is
right.
a big
And
way.
absolutely. And and relate less to the victim, the role of victim, and relate more to I'm a survivalist.
Mhm.
This makes up part of me. It doesn't have to make up my whole
Mhm.
psyche and soul and physicality. You know,
Yeah.
people who have been survivalists of a predatory event or a developmental experience, sadly, the amount of gut issues, the amount of arthritis, the amount of illnesses they have, poor teeth, issues with their jaw, these are often the result of these predatory events that have the trauma, the complex trauma. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there are more and more studies about arthritis and
Mm.
long-term devastating effects of arthritis and trauma.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with homeopathy.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's was a big part of my practice as a naturopath when I was in practice. I have to always state that publicly.
Uh,
But anyway, yeah, and absolutely that's the case, because the types of remedies that show up are grief remedies are
mhm,
it's very clear, and
mm,
when we ask questions and people have arthritis, it's like, okay, there's probably a loss. There's probably, an unresolved grief.
that's right.
Mhm.
It's those autoimmune disorders,
Yes.
and they are being tracked more. And I'm so happy that the scientists and the psychologists who are studying this are actually gathering this data. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a researcher, but in all of my years of working with clients who come in time after time with these issues, with autoimmune immune disorders, with such as arthritis,
Mhm.
such as gut issues,
Yeah.
then the question must be asked:
Mhm.
what is there a memory? Is there anything that happened? And maybe there isn't, but then, and maybe there is, but then we need to start to have conversations with their gut. And that's where the embodied curiosity comes in. I
Mhm.
want to I want to have conversations with their arthritis. I want to have conversations with the part of them that does not have words.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the embodied curiosity. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Well, it's a big tip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is because I mean, once you start down that path, then so many doors open.
So many doors open,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a question of which door first. That's what I found. It's like, people find different therapy, different therapists.
That's right.
It's all there,
It's
and
all there.
it's just a question of, yeah, willing to make a positive step forward, no matter what the pain was, the
That's right.
trauma, the
That's right.
story,
Because I don't want anybody to have
memory.
to walk around saying, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a
Yeah,
victim.
yeah,
Want to help them get to a point where they're saying, I'm a survivalist. I was in the middle of a black forest and it was dark and it was scary and I didn't have the tools to get out, but sometimes I go back in, but I'm not in as much as I used to be. And
yeah.
that makes me a survivalist. And I can feel things in ways that I never felt things before. And I'm
Mhm,
so excited to be able to do this.
mhm,
So, this perspective is not a therapy in and of itself. It is a yes and to whatever therapeutic work anyone is doing.
mhm.
And that's what I want to say to the layperson, and that's what I want to say to therapists. This is a yes and perspective.
Yeah, 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 very much so. Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Anything that's happening in the near future, or any books you're about to write, or
So I am this theory that I'm talking about. I'm in the process of looking for a publisher. The working title right now is Dare to Live,
Mhm.
Liberate the Self from Sexually Traumatic Events and Thrive.
Mm.
And so hopefully by 2026, I will have a publisher and that book will get out there because it needs it needs to fly. Uh, and would offer that people come to my website. The grief website is edienathan.com, and they'll find some things on sexual grief. And then I have sexualgrief.com, and that site continues to grow. And all I want to say, and I've got conferences listed, so if they just go there, I've got a wonderful project where I'm going to be talking to a conference on trauma, complex trauma, and it's for an audience in the Ukraine. And if,
Mm.
you know, as I get more information, I will certainly give it to you, and it's also will be on my website.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending time having this conversation and letting people know, what you do and what is out there, especially.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. So with my conversation with Edie Nathan, I think what applies really to the whole Bowen community is reinforcing the fact that, we are a whole being, right? It's not just physical, it's mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual. It's all of it, and it's how we've interpreted and also experienced, um, whether it's abusive situations or crime, basically to ourselves. So how we've decided to deal with that internally, right? So I think all of that becomes so relevant when we're giving any type of therapy, is just to be really aware that physical pain, whether it's arthritis that you're helping people with or not, there's more to it. There's always more to it. So for those of you who are practicing, that is why we have these moments where people will feel like they can release some of this grief or some of this pain. So it's there, and sometimes it's Bowen therapy, sometimes it's other therapies. We all have a path in our healing journey. So I found this very interesting to from a psychological point of view, to really notice that there's such a connection. Thank you for joining us at the Healers Cafe. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.